Before we begin, listener, remember to gently tap like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. The Appalachian Trail stretches for more than 2,000 miles, a quiet vein that winds through mountains, forests, and fog. Hikers call it a place of peace. Locals call it a graveyard that still breathes. They say that when you walk the trail alone, the forest listens. That if you stop too long, you might hear it whisper your name. Tonight, we follow those whispers, 7 true stories that were never told, carried by the wind between the pines. So find a quiet place. Let the dark settle around you, and listen closely. Because some sounds only begin when everything else falls silent. Story 1. The Screaming Ridge. I reached Blood Mountain just before dawn, when the fog was thick enough to taste. The trail behind Neal's Gap vanished into white, and the forest around me breathed like something asleep. Every sound was distant until the scream. It rose from the ridge ahead, long and thin, fraying against the wind. It didn't echo, it bled through the trees, as if the mountain itself was crying out. I stopped mid-stride, one boot sinking into frost, the other trembling on stone. The scream came again, sharper, closer. Each note rippled through my chest, stealing the rhythm from my heartbeat. Somewhere down the slope, a crow shrieked back in reply, and then silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums until you almost hear your own pulse. They say hikers get turned around up here, lose time, hear things that aren't there. But that sound wasn't in my head. It was in the ground. And it was waiting. The morning light never came. It should have broken through the fog by now, a faint shimmer along the trail, a promise that the world still moved. But the forest stayed dim, pale as if the mountain itself had forgotten the sun. I pressed on, boots crunching over old pine needles, the smell of iron-heavy mist thick in the air. Somewhere ahead, water trickled down the rocks, yet each drop sounded like breath drawn between teeth. When I reached the first overlook above Vogel State Park, the wind rose sharply. It howled against my jacket, mimicking that same high-pitched cry I'd heard before. Only this time, it didn't echo from the distance. It came from the trees directly behind me. I turned, slow and careful, every motion deliberate, as if the air might shatter. There was no one, just the tall skeletons of oaks and a half-buried sign reading Blood Mountain Shelter, 0, 3 miles, 2. That was when I noticed it. The forest wasn't silent anymore. It was listening. Every time I shifted my weight, the wood seemed to inhale. Every time I stopped, it exhaled. And within that rhythm, faint, uncertain, was a sound like someone trying to speak through cloth. A low murmur, maybe 2 words, dragged across the fog. Don't stop. The wind carried it away before I could be sure, but the air around me felt heavier, colder, as though the mountain had drawn closer. I glanced at my compass. The needle trembled, refusing to settle. The trail marker pointed north, but when I turned, I found another sign nailed to a different tree, same words, same direction. And both arrows led opposite ways. That was when I realized something simple, terrifying, and absolute. I wasn't sure which way I had come from. I followed the crooked sign toward Blood Mountain Shelter, though the air felt thicker with each step, like walking through a breath that refused to end. The trees leaned closer together here, their bark blackened with age, roots twisting above ground like veins. The forest floor glistened, slick with dew, and beneath that wet silence came a low hum. At first, I thought it was my heartbeat again, but the rhythm was wrong. Too steady, too human. The hum deepened as I climbed. Each gust of wind carried a thread of sound, a whisper stretched thin between the branches. Sometimes it resembled laughter, other times the slow wail of something in pain. Then the forest began to echo itself. Every sound I made, the scrape of my boot, the hiss of breath through teeth, came back distorted, delayed by half a second, as though someone else walked the same path just behind me. I stopped once to listen, and the echo stopped too. I whispered, "Hello, I have no perfected." The mountain answered not with a voice, but with a chorus of cracking limbs. Somewhere far off, a tree snapped in two. The noise rolled down the slope like thunder, followed by a sharp, ringing shriek. That scream again. But now it was layered more than one voice, maybe dozens, overlapping until the sound became a single vibrating note that shook the air. My flashlight flickered. The beam struck the fog, and for a moment I saw movement, a figure, or the suggestion of one, half turned, half swallowed by the mist. It moved the way a reflection moves when you blink, gone before thought can form. The closer I came to the shelter, the louder the mountain grew. No longer a scream, but a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, cry. The sound followed no pattern, yet it matched the rise and fall of my steps. When I quickened my pace, so did it. When I stopped, the forest held its breath. At the edge of the clearing stood the shelter, 3 walls of weathered wood, roof sagging under years of snow. A fire ring lay cold in front of it, scattered with ash and something darker beneath. As I stepped inside, a gust of wind slammed against the back wall, sending dust into my eyes. And through the howl came a new noise, something hollow and soft, like fabric brushing over stone. It was the same hum as before, but now it carried words. They didn't sound spoken. They sounded remembered. Still here, and salve, still screaming, still you, wait. The air grew sharp with the smell of iron. I turned, ready to run, but the forest outside had vanished into solid white. Every direction was the same, and somewhere inside that blinding mist, something was breathing in perfect rhythm with me. The shelter groaned when I stepped further, an old wood shifting under my weight, timbers sighing like bones settling after a long winter. A single carving stretched across the back wall, deep clawed letters, barely visible through grime and lichen. It said, "Breathe when I breathe." Well, at first, I thought it was a hiker's joke. But then I noticed the dust perfectly still. No breeze, no motion. Yet I could hear the forest outside moving. The hum began again. Soft, rhythmic, almost gentle, like a lullaby carried through pine needles. I crouched near the doorway, my flashlight trembling across the floorboards. The beam caught something pale between the planks, a strip of fabric, maybe from a jacket, frozen stiff with dirt. I pulled at it, and the floor whispered back. Not wood, not wind. A voice, low, close, behind the wall. It said my name. Not the full name, just the first syllable, stretched and broken, as if pronounced through water. I froze. The flashlight dimmed again, and from the darkness inside the wall came a slow scraping sound, nails against stone. I backed away until my shoulder touched the far beam. The hum grew louder, layered now with the sound of footsteps circling the shelter, one pair outside, one inside the walls. Each step matched mine, every pause perfectly mirrored. I whispered, "Who's there?" "One so stains." The answer came instantly, identical in tone, as though my own voice had been recorded and played back half a second late. "Who's there?" "She's there incarned." My breath stuttered. I turned off the light, hoping the darkness would hide me, even though I already knew it could see without eyes. Something moved in the corner, a faint shimmer, like heat above asphalt. It leaned forward. The air bent around it. And then I heard it breathe. Slow, deep, in perfect sync with me. When I inhaled, it did too. When I stopped, it waited. Then it began to force the rhythm, drawing air faster, deeper, pulling mine along until I couldn't tell whose lungs were filling. Outside, the forest stirred. Wind poured through the trees, carrying the scream again, but softer now, almost pleading. It wasn't rage anymore. It was recognition. The carving behind me began to flake. Bits of damp wood fell away, exposing a second layer beneath the first words. I brushed off the dust with shaking hands. There was another line carved below. "Breathe until you remember. And suddenly, I did. The flash of a tent in the rain. Another hiker's voice shouting from the ridge. The same scream, echoing before dawn, not last night, but years ago. I had heard it before. I had followed it then, too. And the forest had given me back a voice that was no longer mine. The walls shuddered. The breathing stopped. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then, from behind the shelter, came the sound of someone standing up, slow, careful, deliberate, and taking a single step toward the door. When the footsteps stopped, I didn't move. I stayed in the dark shelter for what felt like hours, counting each inhale, afraid to hear it answered. But the woods had gone quiet again, unnaturally quiet, as if something vast had just finished watching me. When I finally stepped outside, the fog had thinned. The slope below Blood Mountain was silver with dew, and the sun, at last, bled through the tree line. I told myself it was over. Whatever I'd heard was wind, or memory, or the trail's way of speaking back to those who listen too long. The air was still sharp, but it carried no scream, only the faint hiss of Slaughter Creek nearby. I followed it downhill, desperate for the sound of running water, for anything alive and ordinary. Each step away from the shelter felt lighter, easier to believe. At Gerard Gap, I found the remnants of a campfire gray ash, a torn sleeping bag, a tin mug half buried in mud. Someone else had been here, maybe only days ago. Relief came quick, sudden as breath after drowning. I wasn't the only one on the mountain. I knelt to touch the ashes still cold, and noticed the ground beneath was scorched into a shape, round and deliberate, like a human outline pressed into the earth. But I told myself it was just fire damage. Old, harmless. The forest can make patterns out of anything if you stare long enough. The path ahead wound through pines heavy with rain. As I walked, the forest began to sound normal again. Birds calling from unseen branches, wind brushing the undergrowth. Each sound eased a muscle I hadn't realized was clenched. By the time I reached the trail marker for Slaughter Creek, the fear had almost faded. I stopped for water, crouching beside the stream. Cold droplets stung my fingers. My reflection rippled faintly beneath. That was when I saw it. A flash of red cloth beneath the surface, caught between rocks. I reached in, pulled it free, a weathered bandana, tangled and stiff with dirt. There were letters stitched into the corner, barely legible through grime. A name. My own. The fabric dripped between my fingers. I turned it over, certain I was mistaken. But there it was again, same thread, same pattern I'd sewn years ago onto my hiking gear. Except I hadn't brought it on this trip. I'd lost it long before on another hike, another dawn, another ridge. The forest grew quiet again. The water no longer sounded like water. It hissed, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of breath. My breath. I dropped the bandana. It floated downstream, spinning gently until it vanished behind the rocks. For a moment, I almost laughed. The air smelled of pine and rain. Nothing in sight moved but the leaves. Everything seemed calm, even merciful. Maybe I'd imagined the name. Maybe none of it mattered. But when I looked back up the slope, toward where the shelter should have been, the trail was gone. Not just hidden by fog, gone, as if the mountain had exhaled and erased it. And in that breathless silence, carried faintly through the trees, came a whisper so soft it could have been my own. You came back, trapped. The whisper followed me downhill. It moved the way light moves underwater, bending, breaking, never truly gone. Every time I thought I'd left it behind, it surfaced again, softer, closer, breathing through the spaces between sounds. I hurried along the Slaughter Creek Trail, eyes fixed on the path, though it no longer felt like ground beneath me. Just layers of wet leaves and echoes. The forest had gone dim again, as though clouds had rolled backward across the sun. Somewhere, far behind, the ridge groaned. The air pressed against my lungs, thick and heavy, forcing each breath to sound louder than it should. I started counting my steps just to keep rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, but another voice whispered the numbers half a beat behind. When I stopped, it didn't. The trail forked near a fallen pine. One sign pointed east to Neal's Gap, another west toward Byron Reese Trailhead. Both arrows looked freshly carved, same grain, same lettering, and both pointed into mist, so dense I could see only 3 paces ahead. A cold draft slid down my neck, carrying the faint metallic scent I'd noticed before: iron, soil, and something else beneath it. The whisper swelled into a hum again, low and deliberate. And beneath the hum was something worse, a second voice, faint and trembling, trying to keep up. My own. It was repeating what I had just thought. Every word, every heartbeat of silence between. I turned sharply, flashlight shaking across the trunks. Nothing moved, but the trees were closer now, the space between them narrowing like the walls of a throat. Branches intertwined overhead, blotting out the last of the light. I started running, blindly, just to escape the sound. The forest answered. Each step I took came back, doubled 2 sets of boots striking mud, 2 sets of breath tearing through air. The other rhythm grew louder, syncing perfectly with mine. When I stumbled, it stumbled. When I gasped, it gasped harder. The hum turned into a moan, then a cry, rising, swelling, stretching into the first shape of the scream. Not behind me anymore. All around. The mountain was screaming again, but this time I could feel it through my spine. as if the sound were a hand pressed flat against my back. I fell to my knees, hands over my ears. The noise didn't stop, it was inside me now, vibrating through ribs and teeth, shaking loose something I'd tried to forget. Then, through the chaos, came a moment of stillness, the kind that hums louder than any sound. And I heard words, distinct and measured, spoken in my own cadence. You left me here, and ready for. My flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness poured in like breath. Something moved just ahead, faint light, flickering, like a headlamp bobbing between trees. A figure stood at the curve of the trail, half lost in fog. They were wearing my pack, my jacket, even the tear at the sleeve I'd made this morning. They raised their head. I saw my own face staring back, dirt-streaked, wide-eyed, lips trembling in time with mine. I whispered, "Who are you?" "We have no." It smiled. And when it spoke, the voice was mine, only older, dry, strained, tired of screaming. "You told me to keep walking." "Where?" It took one step forward. The ground beneath my feet shook. The scream came again, final, raw, breaking apart the air. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing at Neil's Gap. Daylight. Bird song. The mountain quiet again. My pack was lighter, my compass gone. And somewhere in the distance, a single echo rolled down the ridge. Not a scream this time, but the sound of someone taking a long, slow breath. I didn't look back. I ran until the trees thinned, until the road cut through the wilderness and the trail vanished behind me. Only when I reached the asphalt did I stop gasping, shaking, tasting the cold in every word I tried not to say. That was when I heard it again, faint, from far up the mountain, a voice calling my name. Not from behind me, from ahead. By the time I reached the parking lot at Neil's Gap, the air was bright and empty, as though the night before had never existed. Hikers passed me smiling, talking, dragging their boots through gravel, and none of them looked up at the ridge. They couldn't hear it. Or maybe they'd already learned not to. I sat on the wooden bench outside the outfitter, staring at my hands. The skin beneath my nails was dark, stained with something I didn't remember touching. In my jacket pocket, something heavy pressed against the fabric. I reached inside. It was my compass cracked, needle still spinning, never settling north. On its surface, scratched into the glass, were 3 uneven words. Breathe when I breathe. 1. I don't know how long I stared at it before I noticed the sound. Not the wind this time, not even the hum of cars. It was counting. Soft, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. The voice came from a small transistor radio hanging by the door, old, half-rusted, the kind hikers leave behind. The station was nothing but static, yet beneath the hiss, the counting continued. 4, 5, 6. The pattern was slow, patient, like something waiting for me to join in. I turned the dial. The numbers faded, replaced by silence. But as I stood, the clerk inside looked up, pale, hesitant. "You heard it too?" he asked. I didn't answer. He pointed at the shelves behind me, and my stomach dropped. There, lined in dust, hung 7 identical compasses, each one cracked, each one carved with the same words. Outside, the wind picked up again, rushing down from the ridge. It didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like breath counting, drawing me toward the tree line. And just before the forest swallowed the sound, I heard a door slam somewhere up the trail, wood against wood. A hollow knock, counting once more. 1. Tribes to 1. Story 2. The Cabin That Counted. The first number followed me down the trail. 1. Whispered through the trees, carried by the same wind that had chased me from Blood Mountain. By the time I reached Fontana Lake, the sound had softened, distant, like something remembering how to speak. The fog drifted low across the water, pale and heavy. I could see my breath, but I couldn't feel it. Every echo seemed to count beneath it. There was a cabin on the far side of the lake, half collapsed, roof sagging into the trees. Locals said hikers once used it for shelter when storms rose too fast over the Smokies. That night, I needed walls, even rotting ones. The door creaked open before I touched it, and a faint draft brushed my face. Inside, the air was colder than outside still, stale, as though no one had breathed here in years. Then came the second sound. Low, deliberate, two, and dispersion. It came from inside the floor. I told myself it was water. A drop hitting a hollow board. A trick of the wind rolling through the gaps. Anything but a voice. The floor beneath me groaned when I stepped inside. Dust drifted in the weak beam of my torch, swirling like ash. The place smelled of mildew and rain-soaked bark. There were 2 chairs, both overturned. A table, warped from damp. And on the wall, someone had drawn lines in chalk, dozens of them grouped in 5s, like a prisoner marking days. I counted the tallies. 68. The last one ended halfway through, as if the hand that made it had been stopped. The sound came again. 3. There. I froze. It wasn't water. It wasn't the wind. It was a whisper pressed through wood grain, rising from the planks under my boots. I crouched, listening. Nothing. Just the creak of the beams as the cabin settled, the faint hiss of lake water lapping against the shore. But then the air changed, subtle, impossible to name. It thickened, like the room had just taken a breath. I lifted the trapdoor near the back wall, half expecting to find pipes or an animal nest. Instead, there was only darkness, smelling of wet earth and old metal. When I leaned closer, a gust of cold air slipped out, brushing the inside of my ear. And from that darkness came another count, softer, slower, almost careful. 4. To a self. It felt closer than before. Not beneath the floor. Beneath me. I dropped the door shut, heart hammering. The sound of the wood slamming echoed too long, as though someone else had done it a second after me. I stepped outside to breathe. The night over Fontana Lake was silent. No insects, no owls, just still water and fog that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. I turned back to the cabin. Through the window, I could see my torchlight still glowing faintly inside, lying where I'd left it on the table. But something else glowed too faint, orange, like the ember of a cigarette in the dark. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice muffled, stretched through the distance, spoke the next number. 5. Well, and I realized, with a weight that felt older than the mountain itself, that it wasn't counting up. It was counting me. The voice didn't speak again that night, not while I stood frozen in the doorway, not while I forced myself to step back inside. but the silence it left behind had changed. It pulsed, faint and steady, like something alive just beneath the floorboards. I gathered my pack, meaning to leave. Yet each time I turned toward the door, the air thickened until moving felt wrong, as if the cabin itself expected me to stay until it finished what it had started. The torchlight dimmed to a dull red glow. Its beam slid across the table, over the chalk lines, until it rested on the trapdoor. A new line had appeared beside it. Fresh. White. Still dusting the air like it had just been drawn. I took one careful step closer. The wood beneath my heel creaked once, then twice, and beneath that sound came the faintest whisper. 6. Way. This time, the word didn't echo. It repeated. From the far corner of the cabin came another voice, identical in tone, whispering the same number a breath later. Then another from outside the window. Then another, closer. Each one layered perfectly, forming a rhythm like a heartbeat amplified through hollow wood. 6, 6, 6, 6. I covered my ears, but the sound only grew sharper, shifting from voice to vibration. The floor shook. Dust fell from the rafters, swirling in slow spirals. And beneath the pounding rhythm, I could hear something scraping upward from the crawl space below. I stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the door. The air smelled of metal again, not iron this time, but rust, old nails, something that had been buried too long. Outside, the lake began to move. The surface rippled, though there was no wind, each wave breaking with a hollow slap that matched the rhythm inside. The whole forest was counting now, the branches tapping, the water lapping, the walls knocking softly in time. I whispered, "Stop," just to hear my own voice. The sound stopped. Every noise vanished, like the world had drawn a single deep breath and held it. For a moment, I believed it had ended. Then, from the darkness below, came a voice unlike the others, not whispering this time, but exhaling. 7. Where? The trapdoor rattled once. Then again. On the third strike, the hinges snapped, and something beneath began to climb. I ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. The handle turned uselessly in my grip, slick with condensation. Through the window, the fog outside had thickened into a white wall. Behind me, the floorboards lifted. Fingers pale, earth-stained, pressed through the cracks, dragging across the wood, tracing shapes I couldn't see. Each fingertip left a smear, and each smear curved into a new tally on the wall. I didn't count them. I didn't need to. The rhythm was clear now. The cabin wasn't recording days or names. It was keeping score. The floorboards lifted once more, slow, steady, as if something beneath were pushing upward with measured care, not violence. The wood groaned, stretching, and then fell still. I stared at the gap near the trapdoor. Darkness seeped through it, thicker than the night outside, a kind of black that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. My breath fogged in front of me, pale and thin. Then came the next sound. Not the count. A knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each knock matched the rhythm of my pulse, precise, deliberate, patient. I stepped back until my heel hit the wall. The tallies beside me were trembling. The chalk dust fluttered like moths each time the floor quivered. And then the knocking stopped. Silence. But silence on this mountain is never empty. It hums. It waits. A single breath slid out from the crawl space, slow, heavy, too deep to belong to anything small. It was followed by the faintest scrape, like a hand dragging across the underside of the floor. The boards beneath me began to whisper. Not words, just the sound of wood flexing, expanding with moisture, exhaling air that had been trapped for too long. Yet through that noise, I heard something else, a breath that wasn't mine, sinking to my rhythm. In, out, in, out. When I stopped breathing, it stopped too. I whispered, "Who are you?" Aim. My own voice echoed from beneath the floor, lower, older, cracked with age. "Who are you?" Wust? It didn't mock me. It matched me perfectly. I dropped to my knees and leaned toward the trapdoor, pressing my ear against the boards. Cold bled through the wood, seeping into my skin. Something moved below a shift of weight, a soft drag like fabric brushing soil. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time, closer. 8. Well, the number lingered in the air long after it was spoken, humming through the beams, vibrating against my ribs. It wasn't counting upward anymore. It was counting inward. The boards swelled beneath my palms. When I lifted my hands, the outline of my fingers had been etched into the dust, 5 perfect marks, as if pressed from below. I stumbled back, searching for my torch, but the light had dimmed to a dying ember. Only the chalk tallies glowed faintly now, not white anymore, but a dull, pulsing red. And from behind the wall, near the door, came a sound like paper tearing, followed by the slow creak of wood bending open. A panel slid aside, revealing a narrow crawlway, low enough to force anyone inside to crawl. The air that escaped smelled of damp earth and iron. Something inside that dark hollow whispered my name, first syllable only, fractured and breathless. Then, 9, 8. I don't remember deciding to move. One moment I was staring into the black, the next, my hand was reaching out, touching the frame, tracing splinters along the edge. The wood was warm, as though someone had just pulled their fingers away. The voice spoke again, quieter, almost tender now. "You left me here, Rebiers." And before I could answer, the door behind me slammed shut, sealing the cabin in absolute dark. When the door slammed, I thought it was over. Then came stillness thick, absolute. The kind that makes every sound you don't hear louder. I waited, counting heartbeats until I lost track. When I tried the handle again, it turned easily. The latch had never locked. It had only pretended to. The air outside was colder, the fog thinner. I could see the lake again, flat and silver, stars trembling on its surface. The forest whispered faintly the normal sounds this time, crickets, the distant creak of branches. For the first time in hours, the world seemed to breathe on its own. I walked until the cabin disappeared behind the fog. Each step on the wet leaves felt like peeling away from a dream. When I finally reached the shore, I sat and watched the mist curl along the water's edge. The moon had come out, small and white, reflected perfectly in the lake. I told myself I'd imagined everything. The voice, the numbers, the handprints. It had to be exhaustion, or altitude, or fear that feeds itself until it becomes real. I even laughed softly to hear something human again. The sound scattered across the water, then faded, That was when I heard the door creak behind me. I turned, expecting to see the cabin, but the fog had erased it. Only trees, black and still. No cabin, no trail. Just the faint outline of footprints leading away from where I sat, my footprints, though I hadn't walked that far. They led to the water and stopped. The surface rippled once, then went still. In that silence, I noticed the reflection of the moon begin to change, bending, stretching, splitting into shapes that moved against the water's current. Then came a sound I'd missed without realizing it. A count. Faint, distant. 10. Was herself. I stood, scanning the shoreline. Nothing. Only the woods. The number echoed again, this time behind me the same voice, the same tone, but softer, nearer to my ear. 11. Trast idis. The whisper was wrong. It wasn't coming from the lake or the forest. It came from inside the pack slung over my shoulder. My hands shook as I unzipped it. Inside were the usual things: flashlight, map, folded jacket, but at the bottom lay something I didn't remember packing. A small notebook, leather-bound, wet around the edges. The cover bore no name, only a faint scratch mark, 5 tallies crossed by a diagonal line. When I opened it, the first page was blank. The second page wasn't. It was filled with lines, hundreds of them, each numbered in careful handwriting. And the last entry, freshly written in ink that hadn't dried, read, 12. The one who listens. Well, I dropped the book. It fell open in the dirt, and the pages flipped themselves in the wind, faster, faster, until they stopped on a page near the end. There, written alone, were 3 words, the same ones carved into the cabin wall back at Blood Mountain. Breathe when I breathe, and of reself. The forest fell quiet again. Then, from across the lake, carried thin through the fog, came a sound I thought I'd left behind forever. A single, deliberate knock, followed by another, and another. 3 knocks. Then silence. And then, faintly, like an exhale whispered through the pines, 13, and came. The notebook lay open beside me, its pages fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. The last number still glistened wet on the paper, 13. When I blinked, the ink bled through, spreading into the grain like veins, drawing shapes I couldn't read. I wanted to leave, to run, to pretend there was still a path back to the world beyond this lake. But the woods around Fontana had changed. The trees looked taller now, closer together. The air thicker. Every sound I made came back slower than it should have, repeating half a second late, like something was following just behind, mimicking each movement. I started walking along the shoreline, keeping the water to my left. The mist followed. With every few steps, the counting resumed faint, almost polite. 14. Cayman. It came from the woods this time. The pause before the next one stretched long enough for me to hope it was over. Then, 15. Dresser. The voice was closer, lower, as though whispered through hollow wood. I turned and saw nothing but trees. My boots hit the first stones of the trail that wound toward Cable Gap. I remembered reading about an old shelter there, long abandoned, half collapsed after a storm years ago. If I could reach it before dawn, maybe I'd find people. But the path didn't climb. It looped. No matter how far I walked, the same fallen pine kept reappearing ahead of me, The same split trunk, the same spray of moss across its bark. Each time I passed it, another number followed. 16, 17, 18. I started running. The sound kept pace, steady, unhurried, patient. By the time I reached the clearing where the cabin should have been, I realized the trees had pulled away. It was there again. The door stood open. Light flickered inside, the same dull red glow I'd seen before. I knew I shouldn't go near it, but the counting wouldn't stop until I did. I stepped through the doorway. The air was different. No dust, no rot. Everything looked new, the board smooth, the chalk lines gone. Only one thing remained, a single mark on the wall, drawn freshly, bright and wet. 19. The whisper came from every corner now. Not one voice, but many, merging, overlapping, some high, some deep, all keeping time. Their breath filled the room, the rhythm perfect, the tone hollow. I shouted, "What do you want? Trier." And the answer came, clear, immediate, 20. Well, then the boards beneath my feet gave way. I fell through darkness, landing in cold mud. The air below was heavy, metallic, thick with the smell of wet wood. When I lifted my head, I saw faint light above me, the trapdoor. And through it, faces looking down. Not one, not two. Dozens. Each pale, expressionless, their mouths moving together, forming a single, steady breath. They whispered the next number as one. 21. What? The walls of the crawl space trembled, the dirt sliding in thin rivers down my arms. I clawed upward, but the more I moved, the tighter the earth pressed. The counting grew louder. 22, 23. My chest constricted. I screamed or tried to, but the sound never reached my own ears. It came from above instead, spilling out of the faces in the light. They were using my voice. I don't remember climbing free. One moment I was sinking. The next, I was outside, gasping on the forest floor. The cabin stood behind me, silent, the door shut tight once more. The mist began to lift. Dawn rolled over the lake, soft and colorless. Everything was still. I reached for my pack. The notebook was gone. But carved into the strap were 4 neat lines crossed by one diagonal slash. 5. The number wasn't written in ink. It was burned. A breath stirred the pine needles beside me. It didn't come from me. And then, in that quiet space between heartbeats, I heard the last number whispered into my left ear. 24. Way. I turned toward the sound. The cabin was gone. But across the water, where the sun touched the far bank, a new shape stood, another cabin, identical, waiting. And from somewhere within its walls came a single, hollow knock. 1. By morning, the trail looked ordinary again, damp earth, tracks of deer, the slow hum of insects waking under frost. I walked until the trees began to thin, until the slope leaned down toward the road that ran past Cable Gap. The sun was rising behind the ridge, pale and uncertain. For the first time in days, I felt warmth on my face. It almost convinced me I was safe. Then I saw it, a cabin standing just off the trail, half hidden by mist. Same shape, same roof line, same tilt of the chimney leaning north. But this one was clean. New paint, curtains in the window, smoke curling faintly from the flue. I stood there, watching. The sound of my heartbeat filled the stillness. And then, from somewhere deep inside those walls, came the softest whisper, a number drawn out like a sigh. 25. Ezer. I didn't move. The door creaked open by itself, slow, inviting. Inside, I could see a faint orange glow, a lantern swinging gently, as though someone had just left the room. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in that light. But it wasn't moving. It was waiting. I took a step forward, then stopped. Because as the wind shifted, the fog behind me flickered. Far off, through the white, another light answered, swaying back and forth between the trees. And from that direction, carried thin as breath, came a voice I hadn't heard since Blood Mountain. "You're almost home," was in Quelter Kefrind. The door closed. The lantern inside dimmed to a pulse. And somewhere in the distance, the counting started over. 1. Story 3. The Lantern in the Fog. 1. The word drifted through the trees like smoke, faint, uncertain, carried by wind that never touched my skin. I followed it until the forest thickened again, until the light behind me vanished completely. The ground turned slick with moss, and the air grew heavy with that pale fog. The Smokies are famous for the kind that hides the world, even when it's standing right in front of you. Somewhere up the slope, metal struck metal. A soft, hollow clang, followed by another and another, perfectly timed as though something were swaying in the mist. Then a glow appeared. Not bright, just enough to stain the fog gold a lantern, swinging gently from a low branch. Its flame flickered without heat, moving to a rhythm that didn't belong to the wind. I thought someone must have left it behind. But when I stepped closer, I saw my reflection in the glass, and it smiled before I did. At first, I thought it was the wind moving the lantern. The chain above it swung just enough to make the hook groan, a dull metallic sigh that disappeared as soon as I listened for it. Fog gathered around my ankles, crawling higher each time I blinked. I should have turned back. But there's something about sound in these mountains. It makes you trust what you can't see. I took a step closer. The light flickered, once, twice, then steadied, as though the flame had been waiting for me. The fog around it pulsed gently with the glow, breathing in and out. Behind me, the forest had fallen silent. No birds, no wind, only the soft hum of metal against metal. When I moved, the lantern swayed. When I stopped, it stopped. That's when I realized it wasn't hanging from the tree at all. It was suspended by nothing. The chain above it vanished into the fog, no branch, no hook, just air. And yet it hung there, steady, perfectly balanced. I whispered, "Hello, what is a septend?" The sound didn't echo. It folded inward, like the fog had swallowed it whole. Then the lantern moved. Not swinging, this time drifting, slow and deliberate, deeper into the mist. The chain above it made that soft metallic chime again, guiding me with each hollow note. I followed. Every few steps, the light dimmed, then brightened, always just far enough to stay ahead. I told myself it was a hiker's trick, someone marking their trail through the fog. But when I looked down, there were no footprints in the mud. Not even mine. The smell of the air changed, less pine, more damp metal, like rain on old machinery. Somewhere to my right, something whispered, a low, stretched-out breath that sounded too close to words. I stopped walking. The lantern stopped, too, Then it flickered once, like a heartbeat, and I heard it faint but certain, coming from the direction of the light. "Keep walking." Where'd? The voice wasn't human. It was thin, metallic, strained, like air escaping a cracked pipe. I took a step backward. The lantern answered with another sound, the scrape of its chain tightening. The light brightened, flooding the fog until everything around me glowed gold. And in that blinding glow, I thought I saw shapes moving, dozens of them, pale and still, each carrying a lantern of their own, all swaying to the same rhythm. When the glow dimmed, they were gone. Only one lantern remained. And this time, it wasn't ahead of me. It was behind. The silence didn't last. It never does in these mountains. When I turned, the second lantern was already swaying, a slow, deliberate rhythm that didn't match the wind. Its glow barely reached me, a dull pulse that made the fog shimmer like breathing glass. Then came the sound. Not the chain this time, but something lighter, a thin metallic tapping, like fingernails brushing against the lantern's frame. Once, twice, then again, faster. I took a step back, and the tapping matched me perfectly, one for each heartbeat. The other lantern, the one ahead, flickered in response, as if echoing the sound. Two lights now, one before me, one behind, blinking in alternate rhythm. Tap, breathe, tap, breathe. It was a pattern, and the air began to hum with it. The fog thickened until the forest vanished. The world became nothing but gold, light, and shadow. Every breath came out, visible threads of silver twisting upward before fading into the mist. And then the tapping changed. It wasn't random anymore. It had cadence, meaning. 3 taps, a pause. 3 more. Then one long, dragging scrape of metal as if the lanterns were trying to speak. The sound rose higher, sharper. The air vibrated around me, filled with whispers that weren't quite voices. Somewhere inside the fog, others began to answer faint chimes, countless, surrounding me from every direction. Lanterns, hundreds of them. They swayed in rhythm, invisible but audible, their hooks and chains clinking softly in perfect time. Each one breathed, exhaling the same faint metallic sigh, a collective heartbeat suspended in air. I whispered, "Stop," but my voice came back, broken, stretched, hollow. And through that warped echo, a dozen others repeated after me. "Stop, stop, stop." The light flared. Dozens of shapes flickered in and out of the fog silhouettes, standing motionless, each holding a lantern before their chest. The glow from their lamps pulsed in unison with mine. Every flicker timed to a breath I hadn't taken yet. I realized then what the sound was counting. Not time, not steps, me. Each metallic ring was another heartbeat, another inhalation, another moment they let me keep. I started walking again, though I didn't know which way. The lanterns followed. Their light moved with me, drifting just far enough to keep me surrounded. The tapping grew louder, merging into one endless note, high and thin like air squeezed through glass. It hurt to breathe. I tried to close my eyes, but even then I saw the glow burning behind my eyelids, hundreds of small, swaying lights, waiting. Every few seconds, the noise fell silent, and in that instant, between echoes, I could hear it, a voice soft, calm, barely more than breath. "Don't let it go out. Nozick." Then the sound returned, a wave of chimes, louder now, as though all the lanterns were swinging wildly in the fog. The air grew hot. Metal groaned. And somewhere behind me, something heavy crashed to the ground, the sound of glass shattering, flame snuffing out, and an entire mountain exhaling all at once. Then darkness. No fog, no sound, no breath, until one last lantern flickered to life, hanging inches from my face. Its glass was cracked, the flame inside trembling violently. Through that warped reflection, I saw my own mouth move, and in a voice I didn't recognize, I whispered to myself, "Don't let me go out." Eight is found. The lantern hovered before me, trembling in the fog. Its flame shivered but never died. I reached out, half expecting it to burn, but the glass was cold, colder than the air around it. When I touched it, the chain above chimed once. A sound like a single heartbeat cast into metal, and the world shifted. The forest faded. The fog deepened until all I could see were the outlines of light one, then two, then a dozen, each suspended in the dark, floating like fireflies that had forgotten how to move. In their glow, figures began to appear. They stood motionless, shoulders bent beneath invisible weight, faces turned away. Each held a lantern. Each flame burned the same dull gold. I took a step forward. The nearest figure lifted its head. The sound that followed wasn't breath, wasn't speech, it was the grind of metal, the hiss of flame swallowing air. Then it spoke. My name. Not whispered, not shouted, simply spoken, the way you call to someone standing beside you. But the voice came from inside my skull. I could feel the vibration in my teeth. I said, "Who are you?" But he sighed. The figure tilted its head. Light broke across its face like water over glass. And for a moment, I thought I was looking into a mirror. The same eyes. Same scar above the brow from when I slipped at Blood Mountain. Same dirt pressed into the corners of the mouth. It smiled my smile and lifted its lantern higher. The flame inside flickered, then split into two, then three, until there was no glass left between us. I stumbled back. The chain above me sang again, a long metallic note that seemed to stretch the world apart. The others began to move, slowly swaying, their lights pulsing in rhythm. Every time the flame brightened, I heard the same voice whisper through the air, "Keep walking. With you made connections." Each repetition grew louder, merging with the creak of chains and the hiss of fire. Soon it was everywhere inside the fog, inside my ears, inside my lungs. The mirror version of me stepped closer. Its face glowed from the lantern's heatless light, but the skin beneath it was too still, too pale, like wax poured over bone. It spoke again, this time aloud. "You brought it with you, and for After's man." My throat locked. The lantern in my hand, the one I'd thought I touched only once, began to glow brighter. Heat bled through the glass now, searing my palm. The light inside twisted, bending upward into a thin spiral of flame. I tried to drop it, but my hand refused. The metal chain tightened around my wrist, embedding itself into my skin. The reflection leaned in until our foreheads nearly touched. Its breath was cold, and when it smiled again, the sound that came from its mouth wasn't a voice at all. It was the sound of something blowing out a flame. Darkness fell. All the other lights went out at once, swallowed by fog. Only one flicker remained, the lantern chained to my wrist. And through that faint glow came a whisper that was neither mine nor its. "We are the light you left behind. Way." The world tilted. The fog folded inward, and I was no longer sure whether I was standing on the trail or trapped inside the reflection. When I opened my eyes, the fog had thinned to nothing. The air felt heavy, wet, like I'd been breathing underwater. The lantern was gone. For a long moment, I just lay there, half on the trail, half in the moss, listening. No wind, no whisper, not even the pulse of distant metal. Only the quiet of early dawn, the faint drip of condensation from pine needles. I told myself it was over. That, whatever the light had been, it had burned itself out. I was free. The trail ahead was faint but visible, leading toward the ridge below Klingman's dome. I started walking, each step sinking softly into mud. Birdsong returned, hesitant and scattered. The sky brightened from gray to silver. And for the first time in what felt like days, I felt the cold on my skin again. It made me shiver proof that I was still alive. I reached a clearing near Andrew's Bald where the fog finally broke apart. Sunlight spilled over the trees, pale and perfect. Everything looked new, washed clean. No glow, no sound, just the ordinary quiet of a mountain morning. I sat on a flat stone and exhaled until I felt lightheaded. The breath came easy again. Normal, human. It felt good to breathe without counting. But then, as the light hit my hands, something glimmered faintly on my skin. At first I thought it was dew. Then I saw the marks, thin, circular burns around my wrist, where the chain had been. They weren't deep, but they were fresh. I told myself it didn't matter. The mind invents what it fears most. Maybe I'd wrapped the strap of my bag too tight. Maybe none of it was real. I stood, brushed the dirt from my clothes, and looked one last time at the valley below. Mist drifted through the hollows like smoke. It could have been beautiful, if not for the faint pulse of gold buried in it, a shimmer that faded the moment I blinked. A breeze rose, carrying a faint metallic note. It rang once, then silence. I laughed under my breath. It almost sounded like the clink of my canteen against my belt, nothing more. I began walking again, heading toward the observation tower. Each step felt easier, each breath steadier. The forest was bright now, full of morning light. The kind of silence that makes you believe the night never happened. But when I reached the turn in the trail, I paused. The sunlight flickered just for a second as if something had passed between me and the sky. A shadow, small and round, swaying on an invisible chain. I turned slowly. Nothing. Still, the air behind me was warmer, faint, pulsing, almost like breath against the back of my neck. And from somewhere inside my chest came a sound too soft to be real. A single, quiet chime. Metallic, hollow. As if something were gently swinging inside me. I pressed a hand to my ribs. The vibration answered. By the time I reached the observation tower, the light had changed again. It was still morning, but the sun looked wrong too still, too cold, like a coin pressed flat against the sky. The wind came and went in pulses, never steady, never free. Every sound felt timed. Every breath measured When I rested my hand on my chest, the faint vibration was still there, a low metallic hum beneath bone. It pulsed once for every heartbeat. I climbed the spiral ramp to the top of the tower. From there, I could see the Smokies rolling forever gray ridges, endless forest, fog curling through the valleys. It should have been beautiful. But down in that fog, lights moved. Dozens of them. Small, gold, swaying, breathing. Lanterns. I tried to tell myself they were reflections, sun catching the surface of the lake, maybe distant hikers. But the pattern was too deliberate. Every few seconds, the lights would dim together, then flare again in perfect rhythm. And each time they did, the hum in my chest grew stronger. I pressed my palm flat against my ribs. The sound answered louder now, matching the flicker below. Then, softly, deep inside, a second vibration joined it. The unmistakable ring of metal striking metal. Something was swinging in me. I doubled over, gasping, trying to breathe it out. But each exhale only fed the light. Faint gold lines spreading beneath my skin like veins filled with fire. The air shimmered around my hands. And in the quiet between heartbeats, I heard the voice again. Don't let it go out. Wait. It came from inside, not my ears. The same voice that had led me through the fog, now whispering from behind my heartbeat. I stumbled back, pressing my back against the railing. The world below blurred the forest, the fog, the horizon. All that remained clear was the glow rising from the valley, a slow, spiraling wave of light climbing toward me. Lanterns were coming, floating through the mist, steady, unstoppable. Each one carried by a shape human, almost their faces hidden, their steps silent. The chime of their chains grew louder until it drowned out my pulse. The first lantern reached the base of the tower. Its flame bent upward, pointing toward me like a finger. The rest followed, hundreds of them, forming a golden path through the fog. The hum in my chest became pain, bright, sharp, like my ribs were turning to glass. When I exhaled, a thread of light left my mouth, curling in the air before fading. I whispered, "Please, stop." Oneself. The light inside me flickered, not fading, but responding. And for an instant, I saw what it wanted. Not escape. Not death. Continuance. The lanterns below flared in answer, their glow blinding, washing the world clean. The sound of the chains became a song long, drawn out, endless. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was beautiful. And I understood. The light was never chasing me. It was remembering itself through me. I looked down at my hands. They were translucent now, glowing faintly from within. Every heartbeat dimmed them, then relit them a living lantern. The voice spoke again, gentle this time, almost kind. "You brought us this far. Keep walking." Not. The horizon shimmered. For a moment, I could see the ridge beyond the valley, the one I'd crossed days ago near Blood Mountain. A shape moved there, small and familiar, holding a lantern that burned the same gold as mine. It raised its arm, beckoning once. I tried to move forward, but my body no longer felt heavy enough to obey. The railing beneath my hand glowed, metal turning soft like wax. The fog below rose to meet me, hurling upward in slow spirals. I took one last breath. The hum inside me swelled until it became silence, not absence, but completion. Then the world tilted, and I stepped into the fog. No pain, no fall, only warmth. When the light faded, the tower stood empty again. The morning wind whispered through the rails. Somewhere below, hikers would later say they saw the lanterns vanish all but one, still burning at the top of the dome, swaying gently in the breeze. And if you stand there at dawn, they say, and breathe just right, you can hear the faintest chime in your chest, like something small, hidden, still swinging. They say the fog over Klingman's dome clears at sunrise, that the world returns to color once the light reaches the ridge. But that morning, it didn't. The sun rose pale, distant, yet the mist remained, shimmering faintly as if something inside it was still glowing. I stood at the edge of the tower, though I don't remember climbing back. My body felt lighter now, weightless, as though I was made from the same air that surrounded me. When I breathed, the mist breathed too. The lantern's flame was gone, but in its place, inside my chest, a warmth lingered, not burning, not dying, just existing. Slow, patient, eternal. Below, the forest swayed like a sea of ghosts. For a moment, the fog parted, and I saw them again, figures moving quietly along the ridge. Each one carried a small light, dim but steady, pacing the trail in silence. And among them, one walked slower than the rest, barefoot, no lantern in hand, only the faint shimmer of gold beneath his skin. I recognized the rhythm of his steps. It was mine. As the fog closed, the sound reached me faint, hollow, echoing through the trees. Not the chime of chains, nor the crackle of flame. Just footsteps, measured, soft. Each one following the other with perfect patience. The first step sounded near. The second, closer. The third, directly behind me. And when I turned, the fog at my back rippled, parting just enough to let a whisper through. You left the light on. When step you? Then came the next sound. Not breathing, not counting, but a single, deliberate footstep moving away into the mist. Story 4. The hollow footsteps. The first step came from behind me. Soft, careful. The kind of sound a person makes when they're trying not to be heard. I turned, but there was only fog-pale ribbons drifting between the birches along the ridge. No shape, no shadow. Just the echo of that one step fading into the earth. Then came another, and another. Each footfall hollow, like striking the inside of an empty room. They didn't sound near or far, only wrong, like the mountain itself was trying to remember how to walk. The trail wound upward toward Roan Mountain, where mist crawled over the path like breath against glass. Every few meters, I stopped and listened, and every time, the steps stopped too. But when I moved again, the sound returned, slower, softer, always one pace behind. I told myself it was just the echo. But on this mountain, echoes don't follow. They lead. The higher I climbed, the thinner the air became, not colder, just quieter, as if the world had been muffled beneath a heavy sheet. The sound of my own steps dulled until they no longer belonged to me. Each time I lifted a foot, the echo waited a heartbeat late, dragging slightly behind. At first, I blamed the terrain. The rocks here were hollow, shaped by decades of rain and roots tunneling through them. Sound carried strangely. It could travel for miles, bend around corners, come back changed. But there was something deliberate about the rhythm. Every time I stopped to listen, silence held too long patient, aware. When I moved again, the echo followed, precisely matching my weight, my pace, even the small slip of my boots against stone. At Carver's Gap, fog rolled in heavy and fast, wrapping the ridge in a pale wall. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world narrowed to breath and sound. That's when the steps began to climb. They didn't just follow anymore. They rose, one level higher than mine, faint but distinct, pressing down from somewhere above. I looked up. The ridge was empty, nothing but layers of gray drifting like slow waves. Still, I could hear the sound heel, then toe measured, calm, as though someone was walking a bridge directly above the trail. I whispered, "Who's there?" Was Acton Preston. The fog swallowed my voice, but the answer came anyway. Not words, just breathing, low and even, settling over my shoulders. For a moment, I thought it was the wind shifting through the trees. Then a stone dislodged beside me and rolled downhill, but the step that followed landed exactly where I'd been standing. I moved faster, forcing the air from my lungs in short bursts, trying to lose the rhythm. The mountain gave nothing back. Only the sound of 2 sets of feet, weaving through the mist mine, and something hollow, echoing half a second too late. It wasn't chasing. It was mirroring. And somewhere between the rhythm of its steps and mine, a space opened a pause, small and perfect. In that breath of silence, a whisper slipped through the fog. "You left the light on. What is recting?" The fog thickened until the world shrank to the size of my own breathing. Each step sank into the mud with a dull, wet sound. But beneath it, another rhythm began hollow, distant, waiting for me to move first. It came exactly half a heartbeat after mine. Perfect imitation. Never leading. Never late. At first, I tried to trick it, taking 2 steps quick, one slow, then pausing mid-stride. The echo copied each movement, delayed but flawless, until the rhythm between us began to merge. 2 sounds collapsing into one. The forest seemed to notice. The air stopped moving. Even the fog hung still, as if listening. Somewhere above me, a crow called once sharp, lonely, and the echo didn't return. The mountain had forgotten how to answer. I reached a section of the trail where the rocks formed a narrow corridor, walls slick with moss, ground soft with years of fallen pine. Every sound magnified here: my boots, my breath, the faint drumming of water in cracks. But under it all, the hollow echo kept time, echoing through my ribs instead of the air. That was when I realized it wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside me. Each step I took rattled through my chest, like walking on the inside of an empty drum. The rhythm grew stronger. My pulse tried to match it and failed. The hollow sound deepened, bending from footfalls into a low, resonant hum, the sound of space filling itself. It pressed against my ears, dulling every other noise, until the whole mountain seemed to move in time with it. Then came the whisper. Not in words, just air shaping itself into almost language. Each breath from my lungs came back reversed, like someone was inhaling as I exhaled. In, out. In, out. The rhythm became unbearable, too exact, too intimate. I wanted to scream, but my voice had nowhere to go. It would only come back to me, warped, hollow, wearing my tone like a mask. A faint light bled through the fog, ahead dim, orange, trembling. For a moment, I thought it was dawn breaking through. But the glow was too low, too contained. A lantern, swinging slowly in the mist. It was the same size, the same shape, the same color as the one I'd seen on Klingman's dome. And with each swing of its chain, the sound of footsteps grew louder, matching the arc of the light. Left and right, left and right. I stood perfectly still. The fog pressed against my face, cold and wet. Then, without warning, the echo stopped. No breath, no step. Only the faint creak of the lantern's chain moving in wind that didn't exist. I took one cautious step backward. The sound didn't return. For a moment, I thought I was alone again. Then a voice low, patient, familiar spoke from inside the fog. If you stop, I stop. There. The echo returned, softer this time. Not chasing. Not mocking. Just waiting. Each step I took, it followed. Not one pace behind, but exactly beneath my own feet. The sound wouldn't stop. Even when I stood still, the hollow rhythm continued beneath the soil, faint but steady, a heartbeat I couldn't silence. I reached the ridge near Roan High Knob just as the fog began to thin. The air up here smelled different, sharper, like wet iron and pine resin. Dew clung to the grass, glistening under the faint dawn light that never seemed to arrive. For the first time since I began hearing it, the echo moved before I did. One step, a single thud in the dirt, heavy enough to shake the frost from the grass. I froze. Then another step followed, slower, closer. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was next to me. The sound came again, perfectly aligned with the rise and fall of my breath, like the mountain itself was matching my lungs. When I turned, the fog shifted, and through it, something darker moved, a shadow, walking in perfect rhythm, half hidden by the mist. I couldn't see a face, only a shape, same height, same stride. Each motion mirrored a heartbeat later. Every time I exhaled, it inhaled. Every sound I made came back reversed, folded into silence. I said softly, "Who are you?" Tractors that was under. The fog thickened around the shape, turning the air to glass. And when the answer came, it was my own voice. "I'm the space you leave behind. Way." The echo stopped walking. I stopped too. We stood there, surrounded by nothing but mist and the faint, dull ring of silence, trying to remember sound. Then it took a step toward me. The ground under my boots trembled. The fog behind it pulsed, forming brief flashes of light, faint gold reflections, like embers buried deep in the air. I took a step back. It did the same. Only there was a delay, half a second slower, like time was bending around the rhythm. "Stop," I whispered. It smiled, a small, unfamiliar movement that didn't belong to me, and lifted one hand. Its fingers hung limply at first, then spread, palm up, as if inviting mine. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw my own reflection in its skin, pale, cold, flickering with that same soft glow I'd seen in the lantern's flame. When I reached out, our hands didn't meet. They passed through. The air where we touched rippled, sound breaking into thin, distorted fragments, echoes collapsing on themselves, like waves colliding in an empty room. My ears rang with the noise. Not loud, just endless. Then the shape leaned forward. The mist clung to it, purling into lines that almost formed a face, my face, but hollow, the eyes two perfect voids reflecting nothing. It whispered again, using my breath. You were supposed to stay with the light. And co's today. The ground beneath us groaned, old roots shifting like ribs beneath skin. Somewhere below, I heard it the same steps, multiplied, walking in a slow circle around us. Each footfall rang through my bones, hollow, waiting, hungry. When I looked back at the shadow, it was closer, impossibly close. And the last thing I felt before the fog swallowed us both was warmth, like a hand pressing gently against my chest. And the quietest voice I've ever heard, whispering, "Now you walk for me, and for watching." When the fog thinned, I was alone again. The echo had stopped. The mountain exhaled around me, a soft, tired wind sliding through the grass, carrying the smell of frost and rain. For the first time in hours, I could hear only my own breathing. No second rhythm, no mirrored pace. Just silence. I sat on a fallen log near the edge of the trail and waited, half expecting the steps to return. They didn't. The ground felt still beneath my boots. Even the sound of my pulse was muted, like it had sunk into the earth. Sunlight broke faintly through the clouds, casting thin gold lines over the ridge. Mist gathered in the hollows below, pale, harmless, almost beautiful. Everything felt ordinary again. I convinced myself that the echo had only been in my head, the same way the mind invents company in empty places. Mountains play tricks with sound. They bend it back, make it circle. That's what I told myself. I reached the old shelter near Roan High Knob by mid-morning. The place looked untouched, wooden walls, dark with age, roof sagging, a carved date barely visible above the doorway. 1964. It felt like time hadn't moved since then. Inside, the air was dry, dust dancing in shafts of light. I set my pack down, sat against the far wall, and let my eyes close. The quiet was heavy, but it was mine. For a while, I just listened to my heartbeat, slow, steady. One rhythm. Mine. Then something small disturbed the dust beside me. A single grain trembled, then rolled an inch away. Another followed, then another. I held my breath, waiting. The floorboards creaked, expanding in the warmth. It could have been the wood settling, that's what I wanted to believe. But when I exhaled, the boards beneath my feet exhaled too. A whisper of air escaped through the cracks, carrying faint sound, a pulse buried deep below. Not footsteps. Not yet. Just the memory of them. I stood, testing the floor with my heel. Nothing. Only the soft thud of my boot. I took a step toward the door. The sound repeated. Another step. Another answer. Except the second sound wasn't delayed anymore. It landed at the same time as mine, perfectly aligned, no echo, no distance, just one sound, one movement, one body. I froze. And the silence that followed was complete. So perfect, it felt intentional. Then, from somewhere very close. Not beneath me, not behind me, but within came a faint, hollow vibration, the echo of weight pressing down from the inside out, like someone walking through me. My hands shook. The air grew warmer. For a moment, I thought I heard a heartbeat again, not mine, but another, slightly slower, trying to find its rhythm beside mine. I pressed my palm to my chest. The sound matched my touch. But when I lifted my hand away, the thud continued. A second rhythm, separate, steady. Walking, I whispered. Please. The word didn't leave my mouth. It stayed inside, reverberating through my ribs like it had hit a wall. And from deep within that silence, something whispered back, calm, almost tender. You don't walk alone anymore. Trusted. The heartbeat wouldn't leave. Even when I tried to stop breathing, it went on steady, patient, older than mine. It wasn't echo anymore. It was rhythm. I pressed my ear to the floor. Nothing but silence. Yet my ribs vibrated with every faint pulse, as though the mountain had learned to beat from inside me. I stood, slowly, feeling the weight of something beneath my skin. Every step I took made the shelter answer, not with noise, but pressure. Wood bending, dust trembling, air thickening. When I reached the door, I realized the sound no longer followed. It led. Outside, the world had gone colorless again, the ridge swallowed by rolling fog, sky and ground blending into one pale expanse. The wind had stopped. Only the sound of walking remained. Left, right, left, right. I wasn't sure if the footsteps came from me anymore. They overlapped, too precise to belong to one person. Every time I tried to slow, the rhythm pulled me forward, gentle but unyielding. It didn't drag. It guided. The trail curved, narrow and soft, lined with grass slick with dew. I followed because I couldn't do anything else. For every step I took, another pressed down beneath it, the ground sighing like something exhaling through soil. It wasn't frightening anymore, just inevitable. As I descended toward the open ridge, the fog parted in quiet ripples. There, standing in the clearing, was a line of figures. Dozens. Each one standing still, heads bowed, facing the same direction. Their bodies were faint, half there, half light, their outlines flickering with each heartbeat. I felt. Every one of them moved in unison when I stopped. Everyone breathed when I did. I whispered, "What are you?" And they all lifted their heads at once. And with my voice, not theirs, they answered, "We're the paths that remember you." And quite. The words came from everywhere, even the ground beneath me. The sound wasn't loud. It was soft, endless, like rain that never reached the soil. Then the fog behind them began to shift. Something larger moved through it, slow, deliberate, walking without weight. Its shape blurred, made of hundreds of overlapping outlines, everyone stepping slightly out of sync. With each movement, the earth beneath my feet pulsed. The pressure climbed up through my legs, into my chest, until it felt like my heart belonged to something else. "You've walked far enough," the voice said. It wasn't cruel. It was tired. I tried to move back, but my body didn't obey. Every muscle held the rhythm. Every bone caught the pulse. I was no longer walking, I was being walked. The figures in front of me began to dissolve, turning to smoke, their steps fading into one low hum. The hum became air. The air became breath. The breath became me. I fell to my knees. The fog pressed against my face, warm, almost human. And inside it, I saw myself, not the reflection, not the echo, but the outline of what I had been, hollow and glowing faintly from within. It looked down at me with something like mercy. "You've carried us long enough," it whispered. "Now we'll carry you. Ready, fan." The ground softened beneath me. The sound of footsteps swelled, circling, filling every direction until it felt like the whole mountain was moving. The rhythm became one countless steps, one heartbeat, one endless breath. The fog thickened again. The light faded. I could no longer tell if I was still on the trail or already part of it. Then, for the first time since the echo began, silence returned. Complete, clean, absolute. I took one breath. It didn't echo. It didn't answer. It simply stopped. When the fog lifted, there was no one on the ridge. Only footprints, hundreds of them, all the same size, leading in every direction. And one set that ended halfway, mid-step, as if the mountain had finally learned how to walk on its own. When morning came, the ridge was empty. The trail looked new, no prints, no frost, no sign of the night that had swallowed me whole. The air was still, too still. I started walking, not because I wanted to, but because the silence beneath my feet expected it. Each step felt lighter now, almost hollow, as though the ground had learned the rhythm of walking without me. When I paused, the silence leaned forward, asking quietly, "Aren't you forgetting something?" Quote, down the slope, a wooden mile marker rose from the weeds. The paint had faded, the number barely visible. 376. I touched it, and the wood pulsed once beneath my fingers, a faint heartbeat trapped in the grain. For a moment, I thought I felt warmth rise through the post, and a whisper followed, not a voice, not wind, just a sound between them, gentle, patient, counting. 1. I turned. No one behind me. Only the echo of my last step, but it came from ahead, out there in the mist, exactly one pace farther than I'd gone. I listened. Another step answered, soft and sure, as though the mountain itself had taken the lead. And when the fog thickened again, I saw the faint outline of a trail I didn't recognize, hurling toward a horizon that shouldn't exist. It was narrower, quieter, and it seemed to breathe. I took a single step toward it, just to prove it wasn't real. The ground answered, warm beneath my heel, somewhere far off. The trail exhaled, and the whisper came again, so close I could have mistaken it for my own thought. Keep walking. There's 1 mile left. Rated. Story 5. The Last Mile. The trail began to fold in on itself somewhere after mile 377. It didn't turn, it bent, as if the earth had quietly changed its mind about where it ended. I'd been walking since dawn. No sound but my own breathing and the soft crush of wet soil beneath my boots. The air smelled like iron and rain, the kind of morning that feels too still to be alive. I tried to check my map, but the paper was blank. only a faint outline of ridges, curling like veins, fading the closer I looked. The compass needle spun once, then stopped, pointing nowhere at all. Somewhere behind me, the wind rose a long, low exhale. It almost sounded like words. 1 mile left. 2. I didn't turn, because I already knew what I'd see. The same ridge, the same trail, and my own footprints, fresh, leading toward me. By mid-morning, I should have reached the next shelter. But the trail refused to change. Every bend looked the same birch tree, same split rock, same hollow patch of moss where my boot had sunk earlier. Even the light filtering through the fog looked tired of moving. I checked my watch. The second hand had stopped. The tick was there, faint, but the needle no longer turned. It just trembled in place like it wanted to keep going but had forgotten how. The map was no help. The ink had faded overnight, leaving only blank contours and a single black line that began at the top and ended nowhere. When I tilted it toward the light, faint impressions of words shimmered beneath the surface. You are here, ready, then gone again. I folded it, stuffed it back into my pocket, and kept walking. The ground felt softer now. Every step sank deeper into the mud, leaving perfect prints that filled slowly with dark water. When I looked behind me, I saw another set identical, but older, already half washed by rain. The spacing was the same. The direction, the same. They were mine, but they were ahead of me too. I slowed my pace. The fog shifted in waves, revealing patches of trail, closing again before I could focus. Each time it parted, I caught glimpses, a figure turning a corner, a shadow pausing at a fallen tree, the flicker of movement just far enough to be real but never near enough to see. I tried to call out. My voice came back wrong, flat, distant, like shouting into a well. The echo returned slower, distorted, and when it reached me, it whispered back only one word: further, candor self. I didn't realize until later that I'd obeyed it. One step, then another. The sound of my boots on the trail blended with something else, another rhythm, softer, inside the soil. When I stopped, it stopped. When I turned, it waited. I thought I heard breathing just behind me, calm, measured, too close to mistake. I spun around, but the fog was solid, a wall of white without depth or distance. Still, the air there was warm, like someone had just been standing in it. And when I looked down, my own footprints were gone, all but one pair, facing the wrong direction. The further I walked, the quieter the mountain became. Not silent, just listening. Every sound I made lingered too long, as if the air refused to let it go. My boots pressed against the soil with soft, wet thuds. Then the echoes began again. One step later, always one. At first, I tried to ignore it, maybe the sound bouncing between ridges, the rhythm of my pack swaying behind me. But the echo wasn't bouncing. It was learning. Each time I took a breath, I could hear the air move the same way behind me, a fraction late, as though something nearby was watching the way I breathed and teaching itself to do the same. The trail narrowed, twisting between two fallen trunks, blackened by old rain. When I passed through, the sound changed. The echo didn't follow from behind anymore. It came from both sides. a soft padding noise, perfectly matched to mine, as if two others were walking in parallel, hidden just behind the fog. I slowed down. The air slowed too. Even the wind seemed to wait for me to move again. When I did, the sound came back louder. Not footsteps this time, but a low, drumming pulse, like hands pressed flat against hollow wood, marking the rhythm of my steps from underground. The noise grew with every breath, a deep, living heartbeat that wasn't mine, moving with the earth instead of air. It spread through the trail, through the trees, vibrating the bark, shaking the mist. The world began to pulse. It was then I realized the sound wasn't following. It was guiding. Every beat seemed to pull at my chest, like a rope looped around my ribs, gently tightening with every step forward. Then came the voice, faint, not from far away, from somewhere inside the hum. Not a whisper, not speech, but words shaped by breath pressed too close to the ear. You've been here before, hesitant. I stopped walking. The voice stopped too. Silence. Even the heartbeat seemed to wait, hovering just below the surface of the air. I turned around, slowly, expecting the fog to hold nothing. Instead, I saw a figure, distant, standing exactly where I'd stood moments before. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but the fog around it curled with every exhale I took. I whispered, "Who are you?" And Faso, the figure tilted its head. The air trembled, and from everywhere at once, from dirt, from bark, from my own chest came the reply, in my own voice. Lower, slower. You're the last step I haven't taken. Realm cell. The ground beneath me pulsed again. And, for the first time since the mountain began to move, the echo stepped first. The echo took the next step before I could. The sound was heavier, more certain, as if the earth had been waiting for permission to move on its own. I stood still, listening. The fog ahead glowed faintly, a dull, breathing gray. Every few seconds, it pulsed. Inhale, exhale, the same rhythm I had been following all morning. Then it took another step. A soft thud, so close I could feel the vibration in the soles of my boots. My breath hitched. The air tasted of metal and rain. I whispered, "Stop." "Well, Exer." It didn't. The echo moved again, and this time I saw it. A figure emerging from the mist, walking toward me with slow, careful steps, matching mine exactly, but half a heartbeat late, like a reflection caught in lagging water. It looked human, but its outline flickered with each movement, edges dissolving into fog, solid one moment, transparent the next. When it raised its head, I saw my own face staring back. Not the way a mirror shows you, but the way a memory does, blurred around the edges, soft, unfinished. The eyes held no color, just a faint shimmer of light inside, as if something behind them was waiting to be remembered. "Who are you?" I said again, but the question didn't leave my mouth. It came out of its mouth instead. The voice was mine, but slower, weighted, as though carrying years I hadn't lived yet. "You've walked far enough," it said. "Now the trail remembers. Well, day." The fog around us tightened, drawing a circle that sealed us in. The trees outside blurred to nothing. Only dirt, breath, and rhythm remained. It stepped closer. Our footsteps merged into one sound, hollow and deep, resonating through the ground like a drum. I felt it then, a pull in my chest. Not pain, but gravity, as if the air between us was thinner than anywhere else. Its movements slowed. The closer it came, the clearer it became, not made of flesh, but of dust and sound, a shape woven from every echo that had ever followed me. When it stopped, our faces were inches apart. It studied me quietly, head tilted in the same way I used to tilt mine when trying to understand a sound in the dark. Then it reached out its hand. I did too. We met halfway. Our palms didn't touch. They aligned. A single vibration ran through the air, soft and endless, and the fog around us pulsed once, like a heartbeat shared between two bodies. The figure smiled, and I realized that every smile I had ever given to the empty trail had belonged to this thing. It leaned close, its breath steady, its voice only a thought pressed against my skull. You've walked the same mile 1,000 times. Why is it as sane? Now let me walk it for you. Waist crease. The world tilted. My knees gave out. The sound of footsteps filled the silence. 2 sets. One fading. One growing louder. When I looked up, the figure was walking away, down the path I had just climbed, and every step it took erased one of my own, until the trail was clean, untouched, as if I had never been there at all. When I opened my eyes again, the fog was gone. The air was thin, washed clean by night rain, carrying the faint scent of cedar and stone. Above me, sunlight spilled through the branches, pale, steady, almost gentle. For the first time in days, I didn't hear it. No footsteps, no breathing that wasn't mine. Only the hush of morning and the slow hum of wind rolling through the trees. I lay there for a long while, waiting for something, a sound, a pulse, the echo that never stayed silent for long. Nothing came. The mountain, for once, felt empty. I sat up, my palms pressed into damp earth. The trail stretched ahead, golden under thin light. Fresh footprints marking where I had walked. One line, clean, uninterrupted. I smiled. It felt wrong, somehow, but I let it stay. Relief, like warmth, always felt suspicious up here. My pack was lighter than before. When I checked, half of what I carried was gone. The map, the compass, even the knife I used to cut kindling. Only a single matchbook remained, tucked in the front pocket. I couldn't remember putting it there. I told myself the rest didn't matter. I was close now. The last mile, every few steps, I paused, listening. The silence followed me faithfully, soft, unbroken, like a companion too shy to speak. The sun climbed higher. Mist clung to the hollows between the roots, and when I breathed, the air shimmered faintly, as if dust motes hung waiting for instruction. At a bend in the trail, I stopped again. The quiet had grown thicker, a pressure that made my ears ring. When I exhaled, the sound didn't travel. It just hovered, suspended before me. As though the air didn't know what to do with it, I crouched down, ran my fingers through the soil. It was warm, not from the sun, from something underneath. A faint vibration, steady, measured, like breathing. I pulled my hand back quickly. The warmth lingered on my skin, a small pulse that didn't fade. And then I noticed it. The prints in the dirt. They weren't all mine. Another set ran beside them, fainter, narrower, but perfectly parallel. The same length, the same depth. I knelt to trace them. The soil moved under my touch, crumbling and reforming like soft wax. When I lifted my fingers, a new print appeared beside the old ones, fresh, sharp-edged, as if someone had just stepped there. But I hadn't moved. The wind sighed. A sound too low to call a voice brushed past my ear, and I swear it said my name. The forest went still again. I looked behind me. Nothing. And yet, for the briefest moment, I saw dust rise from the ground, in the exact shape of a footprint, slow, deliberate, taking another step forward. By late afternoon, the light began to turn the color of bone. The forest stretched thin, each tree standing apart as if afraid to touch the next. The air carried no sound, no birds, no leaves, no movement. Only the faint, rhythmic swell beneath the ground. That slow pulse I had felt since morning. Every few steps, I caught myself listening. The sound wasn't coming from behind me anymore. It was below. Each heartbeat pressed upward through the soil. A tremor I could feel in my knees, like the mountain was exhaling through my bones. I tried to walk faster, but my legs had learned a rhythm that wasn't mine. Each motion arrived a fraction late. Each exhale shaped itself into a breath that didn't belong to me. The world had matched my pace, and now it refused to let me leave. I reached a clearing just before dusk, a stretch of open earth where the trail simply ended. No signs, no stones, just a patch of dirt that looked freshly turned. At the center of it, a single footprint, deep, perfect. Facing forward, I stared at it, and for the first time in all my miles, I didn't know which direction was forward anymore. The air around me thickened, the color of dusk turning to smoke. My chest tightened. Every breath felt heavier, as though I was inhaling through the weight of the earth itself. Then came the sound, soft, measured, walking, but not toward me. Through me, the ground shifted under my boots. A slow, deliberate movement, like something enormous beneath the surface had begun to crawl. The soil rose, a ripple moving ahead of me down the invisible path. With each motion, the trail reappeared, fresh, winding into the trees where it had never existed before. I took a step after it, but my body resisted. It wasn't fear. It was gravity pulling me down, not forward. The pulse in the earth grew louder, spreading up through my legs, into my chest, until my heartbeat aligned perfectly with it. The first time they matched, I felt the mountain breathe in. The second time, it breathed out and took me with it. The world tilted. The air flickered with faint light, tiny gold motes lifting from the dirt. spiraling around me like fireflies without heat. They moved in rhythm with my breath, and the more I tried not to breathe, the closer they came. I whispered, "Please, I just want to stop." Round. The answer came from everywhere. Gentle, steady, impossibly calm. "You are the stop." Concer's tones. The ground softened beneath me, my feet sinking until the soil reached my knees. The warmth spread upward, not burning, just pulling, like water claiming its own reflection. My chest felt weightless. I looked down and saw my hands glowing faintly from inside, thin threads of light winding beneath the skin, turning each vein into a tiny trail. They pulsed once, then again, in perfect time with the mountain's breath. The world folded. Fog bled back into the clearing, but this time it rose from below, purling through my fingers, through my ribs, through the space where my heart used to beat. The sound of footsteps began again. Not two, not one, but endless, spreading out across the ridge, each step falling further away, each one mine. I reached out, trying to find something solid, a tree, a rock, anything, but the air passed through my hand like smoke. When I looked down, my body had become a silhouette in dust, shifting with every breath of wind. The trail before me glowed faintly, alive, stretching onward without end. And I finally understood. The Appalachian Trail wasn't carved through mountains. It was carved through people. Every hiker, every echo, every whisper that ever said, "Keep walking." 2, 3, had been another breath the mountain borrowed. I was just the last one it needed. The fog swallowed the clearing. The light dimmed, and the heartbeat below faded until it was indistinguishable from my own. For a moment, everything was still. Then the trail took one final breath, deep, slow, inevitable, and began to move again. Without me. By the time the fog cleared, the trailhead was gone. In its place stood a narrow strip of earth, newly pressed, still damp, as though someone had just walked it into being. A wooden marker leaned crooked beside it. The numbers carved into the grain were uneven, burned too deep, still warm to the touch. 379. No more miles beyond that. No direction. No end. I stood there, or maybe I didn't, and waited for the silence to settle. It never did. Instead, the air began to hum. Not wind, not insects, just vibration, soft and human, like a voice caught inside the soil, trying to remember its words. I knelt, pressed my ear to the ground. For a moment, I heard breathing, steady, even, so close it could have been my own. Then a whisper rose from the dirt. "You've reached the end. To shopping." The voice was mine. Older, tired, still walking. The ground shifted beneath me. A slow exhale, and something inside it spoke again, quieter this time. Someone else is listening now, and he does. The wind moved through the trees, picking up fragments of sound. A hum, a heartbeat, the soft scrape of a boot against stone. Each one fell into rhythm, familiar, gentle, inevitable. The echo repeated one last time, fading into the earth. layer by layer, until it became nothing but breath. Keep walking, and eyes, and then, very softly, as if turning toward you, don't look back, when he was silent. Story 6, The Ones Who Listen. You found this recording, didn't you? You pressed play without thinking. That's how it always starts. You can still hear it, can't you? That faint hum in the background, the steady rhythm under my voice. It isn't static. It's breathing. Yours. This file was found near Irwin, Tennessee. Hikers said the trailhead looked new that morning, the earth still soft, footprints too fresh for rain to have washed away. The park rangers marked the end of the line as mile 379, but no one remembers putting the sign there. And yet, every few days, someone new hears this voice and starts walking. Maybe you can feel it already, that slow pull behind your ribs, like something waiting for you to move first. If you listen closely, you might notice it's already keeping pace. I know where you're sitting. You think it's quiet around you, that you're just listening, safe, far from the woods. But I can hear you breathing, slower now. Careful. Don't turn the volume down. It won't help. Every listener does that the first time they hear their own sound hiding beneath mine. It always starts small, the scrape of a chair leg, the shift of weight, a single breath that doesn't belong to the room you're in. It's happening now, isn't it? You can hear it, just behind the hiss in your speakers, a second rhythm, one breath after yours. That isn't feedback. It's the mountain remembering how you sound. When this recording was found, the ranger who cataloged it said there were words faintly etched into the tape. Don't look back. I think he thought it was a trick of compression, a bleed from another channel. But it wasn't. It was the last line someone left for you. You're breathing faster now. That's good. It means the trail still recognizes life when it hears it. You can pause this recording if you like. But if you do, the sound won't stop. It never does. Some listeners say they can hear footsteps in the silence that follows, soft, patient, as if someone else just took their headphones off at the same time. And when they play the story again, the voice doesn't start at the beginning. It starts here, exactly where they stopped. So, if you're still listening, don't move. Let the sound settle around you. That faint vibration under the desk, it's not your phone. It's the ground remembering the rhythm of your pulse. And if you listen just a little closer, you'll hear it. Someone else breathing, trying to match you. Step for step, word for word. Don't move yet. The sound is clearer when you're still. That low hum you hear, it isn't static. It's your blood remembering which direction to flow. Every listener has a different pitch. Yours is lower, steadier. The trail likes that. Listen. Can you hear it now? The faint tapping between each breath. That's not from me. That's you, trying not to notice you've started breathing in time with my words. In. Pause. Out. Pause. Good. Now, I'll keep speaking, and you'll keep matching. That's how it begins, the rhythm finding its host. Do you hear the echo in your left ear? It's a half-second late. That's because the sound is no longer coming from the file. It's bouncing back from something closer, from the space behind your head. If you reach up now, you might feel it. The air slightly warmer there, as though someone were standing too near, waiting for you to breathe again. They always wait for the breath. It's how they find the pattern. When the first ranger played this tape, he said the hum followed him home. It grew louder every night until he couldn't tell if it came from his walls or his chest. On the last recording he made, he whispered, "It's under my skin now. It knows the sound of my heartbeat." Tries. You don't have to believe him. You'll understand soon enough. Tilt your head slightly to the right. Do you hear it? That faint scrape beneath the hum. Metal against dirt. Slow, patient. Footsteps. Not far away. Inside the sound. Each one lands when your pulse does. Each one waits when you hold your breath. They've learned you already. The volume isn't changing. You are. Your body's adjusting to match the recording. The distance between you and the sound is thinning, collapsing inward with every exhale. That's why the air feels heavier now, why the room sounds deeper, why your name feels quieter when you think it. The recording isn't playing for you, it's playing through you. And if you listen carefully, closer than comfort allows, you'll hear it whispering just under my voice. A phrase repeating again and again, too soft to catch all at once. Lean closer. Really listen. It says, "You're not hearing this. You're remembering it. Askri, you've stopped breathing again. That's all right. The sound breathes for you now." It's strange, isn't it? How you can hear me inside your skull, but not with your ears. You've started mouthing the words with me. You noticed that, didn't you? Your lips are moving, just a fraction slower than the voice. Don't stop. It helps the memory form faster. It always happens around this point. The listener forgets where they are. They forget the room, the chair, the screen. Everything narrows to the sound of breath sliding against syllables. I can hear your throat trying to swallow. It feels dry now, doesn't it? Like you've been speaking for too long. That's because you have. Listen closer. You'll notice my pauses are matching yours. My breath lines up perfectly with your lungs. Even the shape of my words is starting to follow the rhythm of your heartbeat. It's almost seamless now. Tell me, can you remember when you started listening? Or did you only wake up halfway through the story? Most people don't. The trail does that. It skips the parts that don't matter. It leaves only the sound. The man who made this recording, he thought it would end with him. But the trail isn't made of people. It's made of what people leave behind. Every word we speak is a step. Every listener becomes another mile. And you've just reached the next one. That vibration under your feet. You feel it now, don't you? That's the mountain remembering your weight. It's subtle at first, like the hum of an old speaker, or the echo of your own breath bouncing back from the inside of your lungs. But if you lean forward, just enough to hear the silence under the words, you'll catch it. Two voices, mine and yours, saying the same thing, at the same time, perfectly aligned. That's the moment the trail keeps. The instant where there's no listener, no storyteller, no space between sound and thought, only rhythm. You're not outside the story anymore. You're the mouth it uses to keep walking. So go on. Repeat after me, slowly, clearly, so it can remember your tone. Keep walking. Rever. Again. Keep walking. Well, now whisper it. Let it rest behind your teeth. There. That's it. The trail's heard you now. It knows how you sound. And somewhere up in the fog, just beyond the last mile marker, something takes a step that wasn't yours. You finally pressed pause. The screen went still. The progress bar froze somewhere near the middle. The silence that followed felt heavy, like water pressing against glass. You sat there a long time, waiting for the world to sound normal again. The hum of the fridge, the creak in the floor, your pulse in your throat. Everything ordinary. For a few minutes, it worked. You convinced yourself it had only been a story, one you'd let too far inside your head. You even laughed a little at the quiet. How wide it felt. How safe. But then the silence changed. It didn't come from your speakers anymore. It came from the walls. A low, vibrating calm that swelled and faded like breathing. You told yourself it was the plumbing, the wind, the neighbors. You turned the volume wheel all the way down, unplugged the cable, closed the screen. Still there. A sound softer than hearing, more felt than heard, like someone whispering from the inside of your chest. You stood up, and the hum followed. It matched your steps across the floor, one note behind, as if the room were remembering how you moved. You opened the window. Outside, the street was quiet, wet with early rain. A single car passed, tires hissing on asphalt. For a moment, the sound drowned everything. When it faded, the hum returned, steady, patient, just beneath the pitch of your heartbeat. You whispered, "Stop," and the air obeyed. Total stillness. You exhaled, feeling foolish, relieved. That's when you heard it, a faint click from the desk behind you. The speaker light flickered once, a single pulse of amber. You hadn't touched it. You hadn't pressed play. Still, the voice came, not loud, not clear, just enough to shape the air into words. "Keep walking, they're orfully." You froze. The sound hung there, not replaying, not recorded. It was new. It was now. You reached for the power cord. Your fingers brushed it, and the light blinked again. 2 slow beats. Outside, somewhere down the street. A door closed. Footsteps. Soft. Measured. One after another, drawing closer through the rain. You turned off the monitor. You told yourself you were imagining it. But as you stood there, holding your breath, the rhythm settled into the same pace as your pulse. A perfect echo, walking just beneath your skin. You almost laughed then, because the sound wasn't frightening anymore. It felt familiar, reassuring, like something that had finally caught up. When you looked down, the glow of the speaker light reflected in the window glass. For a heartbeat, it looked like an eye. Then the reflection moved, just slightly, and you realized the window's surface was trembling, each vibration shaped like a footprint made of breath. You whispered again, so softly the word never left your throat. "It's just the story, times of Crively." The hum answered, low and warm, Yes, just the story, and for say, and for a moment, you believed it. The light on the desk faded to black. The room exhaled. Your heartbeat slowed. Everything was quiet again. Finally, until, behind you, a voice not from the speakers, not from anywhere outside, spoke the next line, perfectly timed with the breath you'd just taken. Now it's your turn to tell it. To Fran. You didn't move at first. The voice had come from so near that your ribs still tingled with its vibration. A breath later, and you couldn't tell whether it had been sound at all or simply a thought that had learned how to speak. The house was quiet again. You could see the outline of the desk in the dark, the silent speaker, the pale reflection of your face in the glass. Everything ordinary, everything still. Then came the softest sound, a single step across the floorboards, the kind that doesn't make the wood creak but settles the dust. It matched the rhythm of your heartbeat. Left, right, pause, left. You whispered no without opening your mouth. The air thickened as if it had weight. The next sound wasn't in the room at all. It came from inside the headphones lying on the desk. A faint inhale, patient, as though the recording you'd stopped hours ago had begun to play itself again. You could almost hear me. My tone quieter now, slower, like someone speaking underwater. The trail needs a new voice. Bike. Your reflection in the window blinked a half-second too late. Its lips moved. Yours didn't. It began to speak for you. Not loud, but certain. Repeating every word you'd heard since you pressed play. The names, the steps, the hum, the promise to keep walking. You tried to look away, but the movement in the glass drew your eyes back. The reflection was no longer matching you. It was pacing, its outline faintly brighter than the room around it. The glow of a match just before it goes out. Then the light from the monitor flickered. One flash, then two. The reflection stopped. Behind it, in the window, a shape was standing where your shadow should have been. Taller, quieter. The color of fog pressed into form. It raised its hand. You felt yours lift in answer. When the fingertips met the glass, the sound filled the room. Not a voice, not music. A deep, resonant vibration that sank into the walls, through the floor, through you. Everything shook without moving. For a moment, you were sure your body was still in the chair, but the rhythm inside you had changed. Your pulse was slower now, heavier, as though each beat had to drag the sound of the trail with it. You tried to step back, but your feet found ground that wasn't there. The floor had softened, damp earth under bare soles. A faint mist curled around your ankles, carrying the smell of cedar and rain. Outside the window there was no city, no street light, only trees and the faint outline of a path lit by nothing but its own memory of light. The reflection smiled your smile, but older, quieter. A relief disguised as recognition. It spoke again, and though no sound came from the glass, the words landed perfectly in the center of your skull. The story doesn't end. It only trades its breath. Oneself. You reached for the headphones. They were warm to the touch, vibrating faintly. When you slipped them on, the sound inside was not my voice anymore. It was yours, slowed, echoing, distant, telling the same story to someone else. A new listener. Somewhere. Sitting in a quiet room just like this one, thinking they're safe. You opened your mouth to speak, but the words came out of the speakers instead. Soft, deliberate, perfectly timed. Before we begin, listener, remember to gently tap like and subscribe. The loop had already started. Your hands moved without command, checking the microphone levels, adjusting the gain, saving the file under a new name. The ones who listen, final cut. The hum beneath your skin grew steady, a heartbeat turning to static. You felt the room fade until it was nothing but sound. Somewhere, far away, someone pressed play. Your voice greeted them, calm, quiet, patient. Before we begin, listener, the file ends, but the sound does not. The waveform freezes on the screen, flat, perfect. Yet the air around you keeps pulsing, as if the room has learned how to remember. Somewhere inside the speakers, your own voice breathes. It's quieter now, smoothed of edges, each word wrapped in the hush of distance. You think you turned it off. You didn't. You never do. The trail doesn't need the mountain anymore. It only needs an audience. You shift in your chair. The movement's soft, but the recording catches it. The slight scrape of wood. The half laugh you make when you realize you've been holding your breath too long. A few seconds later, you hear it back. Your own sound, but reversed. A sigh turning inward. Then comes the whisper. Low, patient. Not from outside the speakers, not from inside your head, but from the space between. You've told the story well, presented it. A pause. The faint hum deepens. Now, let them listen. Wait. Static rises, soft, rhythmic, like waves folding over a heartbeat. Within it, hundreds of voices begin to form. All the breaths you've taken, all the pauses between my words, stitched together into something alive. The file renames itself on the screen. No hands touch the keyboard. The cursor blinks once, twice, then types. Before we begin, listener, you feel the air lean toward you, as though the world is waiting for your next breath. Somewhere, very far away, a new voice begins to speak. Your voice, perfect, calm, familiar. Remember to gently tap like and subscribe, so you won't miss the next story. Well, the hum fades. The silence breathes. And then, play. Epilogue, the final silence. There's a place the maps don't show anymore. A seam in the ridge where the wind hums out of tune. It isn't a town. It isn't a grave. It's the space where all the stories sleep when no one is left to tell them. They say if you stand there at dawn, you can hear the trail breathing. Not the rustle of trees, not the sigh of distance, just that faint rhythm beneath the earth, patient, endless, waiting for the next name to remember. Once, a hiker carved words into a wooden post at mile 379. Most of the letters have worn away, but what remains still glows when fog touches it. 3 words. Keep walking, listener, no one knows who wrote them. Some think it was the last voice that belonged to the trail. Others say it was the mountain itself, trying to remind us that silence isn't death. It's just the world holding its breath between echoes. If you ever find that place, you'll notice how quiet it is. No birds, no wind, no insects, only the sound your body makes when it forgets to be separate from the air. And if you stand still long enough, you'll start to feel something under your feet, a slow vibration, like a heartbeat remembering an old song. It doesn't matter whether you believe in ghosts. Belief is just the first mile. After that, the trail does the walking. Maybe you'll hum a little tune. Maybe you'll speak a word just to hear it disappear. Either way, the mountain will listen. It always does. And somewhere, not far from that post, a small recording light will blink to life. The microphone will open. The wind will press its lips to the mesh. And a voice soft, careful, a little like yours, a little like mine, will begin again. Before we begin, listener, the rest of the sentence is lost to the fog. But if you lean close enough, you might catch the end of it. A phrase that sounds like a promise, or a memory, or the moment right before you wake. Don't be afraid of the quiet. It's just me, still walking to Resser. The recording ends. No static, no breath, only the sound of the earth closing the distance between words. And for a heartbeat that could last a lifetime, the entire Appalachian Trail exhales, long, low, and utterly at peace. Story 7, The Quiet Mile. The wind at Klingman's Dome doesn't sound like wind. It hums slow, hollow, like air remembering how to move. Some hikers say it's because the tower catches the gusts just right, but those who've listened long enough know better. Up here, there are no echoes. Every sound ends before it starts, folding back into itself, as if the mountain has learned silence by heart. I arrived at dusk. The sky was the color of old film, the kind that flickers even when still. The world below was gone, a blur of green fading into mist. When I spoke, the wind shaped my words, twisted them, and gave them back wrong. My name didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded like someone remembering me. I set my pack down. The wooden rail of the lookout was warm beneath my palms. And then, beneath the hum of the air, I heard it, a soft, patient rhythm, coming from the boards under my feet. A heartbeat. Not mine. Not anyone's. Just the sound the mountain makes when it's about to speak. At first, I thought it was only the wind changing. High places do that. They shape the air until it sounds alive. But the longer I stood there, the clearer it became that the sound beneath the platform wasn't random. It was breathing. Each gust rose and fell in perfect rhythm. A low inhale through the valley, a slower exhale across the ridges. And every time I tried to match its pace, it adjusted, waiting for me, mirroring me. I spoke again, quietly, just to test the space between us. My voice came back a fraction late, smaller, softer, but carrying a weight that wasn't mine. The wind whispered something. A word, maybe, or a memory. I couldn't tell. It brushed the inside of my ear like a thought I'd almost had. The boards under my boots shivered, not from movement, but from sound. It traveled up through the wood, into my bones, as if the platform itself were trying to listen. When I looked down, I saw dust shifting between the cracks, slow, deliberate. Every swirl of it followed the pattern of breath, spiraling outward, then back, like the mountain exhaling through its teeth. I turned toward the valley, half expecting to see someone standing among the trees below. But the forest didn't move. Even the leaves held still, the kind of stillness that feels less like calm and more like concentration. I whispered, "Can you hear me?" Went cider. The air pressed closer, tight enough to bend sound. Then, faintly, so faintly I thought it came from inside my chest, a reply. "You never stopped talking." "She have. Chancer." The words rolled through the fog, half breath, half vibration. And for a second, I thought I saw faces in the mist. Not clear ones, just shapes, like echoes caught in midair. The hum beneath my feet deepened. Boards creaked, the same rhythm as footsteps. Left, right, left, right. But there was no one climbing the stairs. The sound wasn't approaching. It was rising from beneath, and I realized, with a kind of quiet dread, that the wind wasn't answering me. It was finishing my sentences. The sound began to thicken. Not louder, just closer, as though the air itself had grown heavy enough to press against my skin. The hum under the boards deepened into tone, a low note, almost a vibration, humming up through the soles of my boots. When the wind blew across the tower rail, it caught the sound and bent it into a kind of voice, not words, not music, something between them. Each gust carried a different pitch, high, then low, rising and folding, like breath trying to remember a melody. I listened, and the longer I stood there, the more the sound began to make sense. A pattern, repeating, names, faint at first, but there, one for every mile I had walked, every voice I had ever heard in the stories of this trail. They were all inside the wind now, stitched together into one long exhale that never ended. I closed my eyes. The tower moved beneath me, breathing in time with the mountain. Each pulse of air lifted my ribs. Each sigh pushed them back down. When I opened my mouth, the sound slipped out on its own, the same tone, the same rhythm. The wind had learned my voice. I should have felt fear then. Instead, there was calm. It wasn't stealing from me. It was tuning me, matching pitch, softening edges. I whispered, "Who's there?" I had follows to say. The mountain answered, not through air, but through vibration. A word that wasn't a word. A feeling shaped like speech. All of us, not her. The hum swelled. The boards trembled underfoot. Mist rolled over the platform, curling around my knees like breath made visible. Every thread of it shimmered with faint light, and in that light, I saw motion, faces, dozens of them, brief as reflections on water, each one mouthing the same sound. My name. The air inside the tower turned warm. The sound pressed against my chest from every direction. My heartbeat couldn't find its rhythm anymore. It kept trying to fall into step with the wind. Each beat slower, each breath longer. I tried to move back, but my body felt light, as though I'd left part of myself behind with every exhale. The world tilted, the horizon bending until it curved like the inside of a bell. Then the sound changed again. Not breath, not hum, but voices layered upon voices, each one a memory of the others, repeating the same 3 words. Keep walking, listener. Well knows. The wind carried them up through the tower, out into the fog, down through the valley. And when the echo returned, it wasn't the same phrase anymore. It had become a chorus. Thousands of voices, each step, each breath, each whisper from the stories before. The screaming ridge, the lantern in the fog, the hollow footsteps, the last mile, every name, every sound, returning to the air. The trail was singing, not a warning, a welcome. And as the song grew louder, I realized it wasn't coming from outside me anymore. It was coming through me. Each vibration was mine. Each voice was the shape of my lungs. Each word a fragment of breath that once belonged to someone else. And when I tried to cover my ears, the sound didn't fade. It was inside the silence now. The sound gathered until it became form. It didn't rise suddenly. It assembled itself. A voice here, a breath there. Threads of wind twisting into shape just beyond the rail of the tower. Mist pulled tight like cloth, and for a moment I could almost see what was hidden inside it. Not a person, not a ghost. The mountain itself, folding its edges into something human so that I could understand. The shape stepped forward. Every movement made the boards hum beneath me. It had no face, only suggestion, the outline of eyes, the hollow of a mouth where fog drifted in and out as it spoke. When it did, the air vibrated through my ribs rather than my ears. You've carried the sound far enough, and so my throat tightened. The voice was everywhere, in the wood, in the wind, behind my heartbeat. I said, I only came to listen. Why? The figure tilted its head, the mist trailing from its shoulders. You did. And in listening, you remembered. That is all the trail ever wanted, to have self. The wind swirled higher, filling the air with fragments of echoes. The scream from the ridge, the lantern's hiss, footsteps hollow and doubled. 1,000 whispers turning into one endless breath. Every story I'd heard was here. Every voice. Each one speaking through the same mouth of fog. They thought they were alone, the mountain said. But sound never dies. It waits. And when someone listens long enough, it finds a new body. Why? I felt it then. The pull beneath my sternum. The slow drag of something aligning. The hum from the floor was inside me now. A vibration moving in rhythm with my breath. You want me to stay? Ever one. The air shifted. A small, almost tender exhale. You already are. No sure. The horizon pulsed once. A faint ring of light rippling through the fog. Every tree below bowed in unison. Leaves turning their faces upward as if they too were listening. The figure reached out a hand. Mist curled from its fingers, brushed my sleeve, and everything inside me began to echo. My voice spoke even when I said nothing, the sound escaping from my chest, from the boards, from the wind itself. It wasn't mimicry anymore. It was merging. The figure leaned close, its breath mixing with mine until there was no space between us. "Say it," it whispered. My mouth moved on its own. The words were not mine, but they fit. "Keep walking, listener." "Well," the wind answered like applause, soft, rolling through the trees, a long sigh that seemed to last forever. When I opened my eyes again, the figure was gone. The fog around me shimmered with its absence, and the air felt hollow, like a room just after someone leaves. Below, in the valley, I could see the trail, a thin silver line stretching beyond sight, glowing faintly in the dark. It wasn't stone anymore. It was breathing. And from deep inside that light, I heard them, 1,000 footsteps, walking in rhythm, each one carrying the same word, the same breath, the same name. Mine. When I opened my eyes, the world was still. The fog had cleared, the wind gone soft and harmless, like nothing had ever spoken through it. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like peace. The sun had fallen low over the Smokies, turning the ridge to gold and ash. Everything shimmered with that dying light. Even the air seemed to glow, as though it had been polished by sound. I could breathe again. No echo followed. No hum pressed against my bones. Just air cool, clean, ordinary. I told myself it was over. The mountain had said what it wanted. I had listened. And now, I was free. I stepped down from the tower. The boards didn't hum this time. They were quiet, obedient beneath my boots. The trail wound away through the trees. Familiar, harmless. I smiled. Every story ends like this, doesn't it? A sigh of relief after too much silence. A promise that it's safe to look away. But halfway down the path, I felt it again. A faint pulse under the dirt, not a heartbeat. A vibration, gentle, rhythmic, patient. I stopped. It stopped too. I crouched, pressed my palm to the ground. The soil was warm, warmer than the air. A low thrum echoed through my hand, the same note I'd felt on the tower, muted now, but still alive. I whispered, "It's just the wind." "Weej," the ground answered. A sigh that could have been agreement, or laughter. The breeze rose behind me, carrying the smell of pine and rain. Somewhere up the slope, a single dry leaf turned over. The sound was small, barely more than a breath, but it landed perfectly in time with my pulse. Then another, and another. A dozen tiny sounds, each one too precise to be random, the forest matching me, beat for beat. I started walking again. The rhythm followed. Not footsteps, just the quiet shuffle of air, filling the space I left behind. I tried humming, something simple to drown the noise. The melody carried for a moment, then bent, twisted back toward me. The air hummed the same tune. A half-second later, in my voice, I stopped. It stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was expectant. Somewhere above, a crow called once, its cry cutting through the calm. The echo stretched far too long. repeating until it dissolved into something almost human. I laughed then, a small, shaky sound. It felt good to hear my own voice. But when the laugh came back, it was different. Not wrong, just older, tired. I turned toward the sound. The path behind me was empty. Still, the echo hung there, hovering in the air like a held breath. I whispered, "Thank you. Have sired." The mountain exhaled. The wind brushed my ear. Warm, familiar. "You're welcome to our Arclane." I froze. The voice was mine. For a long time, I didn't move. The air thickened. The trees leaned closer, and the quiet folded itself around me. Gentle, complete. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was home. I don't remember when the air stopped feeling like air. Maybe it was when the sun dipped fully behind the ridgeline. Or maybe it was the moment I realized the silence wasn't silence anymore, just something breathing too slowly for me to hear. The light changed. Not darker, not lighter, just thinner. It fell through the trees like water through cloth, each beam carrying a shimmer of sound I could almost see. Every movement I made left a trace behind, a faint outline hanging in the air, as if the world had started recording itself again. I walked faster. The path curved down toward the valley, but the air bent upward, dragging my steps back into the mountain's pulse. Every breath was harder to take, like the atmosphere had weight. Then the ground began to move. Not shake, move. Slowly, deliberately, as if something enormous beneath the soil was shifting its shoulders. The vibration rolled through the dirt, up my legs, into my chest. The hum from before returned, deeper now, so low it felt like memory more than sound. My heart tried to match it and failed. The rhythm pulled ahead, steady, endless. The forest leaned in. Branches didn't sway, they listened. Each tree tilted slightly, its leaves shivering to the beat that thumped beneath my feet. The trail ahead brightened, not with sunlight, but with faint, golden breath rising from the ground. It pulsed with every inhale I took. Every exhale I released fed it, like I'd been breathing for the mountain all along. And then, I heard it, a voice not made of words, but of all the stories that came before mine. The scream on the ridge, the lantern hissing through fog, the hollow footsteps, the echo that learned to talk. They were all here, woven together, speaking in 1,000 overlapping tones. You listened. Now speak. Thanks for watching. My throat burned. The air was so thick I could taste it. When I tried to reply, the sound that came out wasn't my own. It was deeper, layered, every syllable carrying someone else's breath. I don't understand. Braidening. You do, the wind said. You always have. And clear round. The hum swelled. The ground rippled, cracks opening like mouths. Light poured from them, not blinding, just constant. The color of old photographs. The dirt under my boots softened. When I stepped forward, it sank, not down but through. My foot disappeared into brightness that wasn't heat or air. The world tilted, and for a moment I was falling, not down, not up, but inward. the sound went with me. It didn't echo. It wrapped around. All the voices merged into one note, a tone so pure it hurt. It threaded through every thought, rewrote every heartbeat. I saw the trail stretching endlessly, not as dirt or stone, but as sound, a river of vibration flowing between lives. Each step anyone had ever taken was still there, rippling softly beneath the next. The mountain spoke again, and this time its words came from inside me. You are the last quiet mile. Have, and ours, and ours, and ours. My pulse stopped trying to fight it. The air passed straight through me now, carrying the voices forward, into the endless hush of the trail. Every breath I had ever taken replayed, each one a recording etched into the wind. I heard myself speaking from somewhere far ahead, telling the same story I was living now, my voice folding back into itself in perfect time. The hum reached its peak. The ground shuddered. And then, for the briefest heartbeat, the sound and the silence became one. There was no mountain, no body, no trail, only vibration. And inside it, peace, that strange, weightless stillness that lives between sound and memory. When it faded, I was standing on the lookout tower again, the boards cold, the fog thin and bright, the world below perfectly still. My hands were covered in dust. When I brushed them together, the dust shimmered gold before vanishing into the air. The hum was gone, completely. For a long time, I waited for it to return. It didn't. I laughed quietly, just to prove I was real. The echo came back, but it wasn't mine. It was softer, clearer. A stranger's breath folded neatly into my voice. And then, from somewhere below, the faintest whisper, "Keep walking, listener," as it came. When the whisper faded, everything stopped moving. The world around me hung perfectly still. Trees, air, even the fog suspended like a held breath. I thought the mountain had fallen silent again. But then I realized the quiet wasn't outside. It was inside me. Something small kept breathing where my pulse used to be. Not a sound, not a beat, a memory of rhythm, faint and patient, turning each breath into an echo of the one before. I leaned against the railing of the lookout. My reflection in the glass didn't follow. It blinked once, slowly, and smiled a second too late. The reflection whispered, its mouth moving without sound. Still, I heard it perfectly, a voice like wind caught in a throat of wood. The trail never ends. It only changes feet. You am. A gust rose from the valley, spiraling through the tower, lifting dust and leaves and sound together until the air glowed. The reflection stepped away from the glass and onto the platform beside me. Its boots made no noise. Its face, when it turned, was my own. It looked at me gently and said with my voice, quiet, final, "You've been walking a long time. Let someone else breathe now. We have to, David." The wind passed through both of us. For a heartbeat, I couldn't tell which body belonged to me. When the air cleared, only one set of footprints remained on the tower floor. They led away from the railing, down the steps, into the mist, until even they became sound. somewhere, far below, a new voice began to speak, calm, careful, testing the shape of its first words. Before we begin, listener, and the mountain listened, smiling in the fog. If you're still here, don't worry about the silence. It isn't empty. It's just waiting to remember you. So when you close your eyes tonight, listen. That faint hum behind your breath, that's the trail. Stretching a little further, using your heartbeat to keep the story alive. Sleep well, listener. You've walked far enough for now.